So this particular individual had a company that was called something Institute, and this is what happened. He made misleading investment promises. Surprise, surprise. Marketing off the plan as a way to get rich. There's that word, with little or no financial risk. Yes, please. I'll have that, Ben. Little or no financial risk. Aggressive seminar marketing and fraudulent loan applications. This was quite big at the time, Ben, because you didn't have the same consumer credit code regulation that we exist in now. So falsifying documents, pushing through loans without having anything closely representing the truth was commonplace. And so these loan applications using deceptive tactics, sometimes without the applicant knowing that they were doing that, and then manipulating market sentiment through creating a fear of missing out. Act fast, do it now. There's only a few to go. So how did it collapse, Ben?
Yeah, well, effectively at the end of the day, ASIC investigated and exposed that they were using misleading tactics. Investors went on to lose millions of dollars in promised returns that failed to materialise. Then the banks started to get involved in terms of looking at some of the loan applications and found discrepancies in this particular person's property development applications. And so the lesson from this is obviously that there's no such thing as guaranteed returns. There's absolute risk, and that's the red flag. Property investment is always risky. There is calculated risk that you're taking. There are no guarantees in terms of what you're doing.
So the next one is another high-profile person. It was a man, and this particular strategy was lots of advertising that you could buy a house for $1, often without deposits or bank loans. But make no mistake, there was a very clear strategy as a funnel to get people hooked in by that advertisement. And then what happens is they get sold seminars and boot camps for $25,000 plus, Ben, promising life-changing property strategies. There was lease options involved. They were engaging in complex financing tactics around vendor financing. There was which were risky and unregulated. And there was a ton of success stories that were fabricated, misleading, and exaggerated.
They were preying on some of the more vulnerable people, or they were teaching investors to prey on some of the most vulnerable people with contracts which were absolutely in their favour. And so there was lots of problems with that, hence why ACCC and ASIC got involved and they found that the claims were false and very much misleading. Consumers lodged those complaints after failing to achieve those promised success. And then the federal court eventually fined this particular person $18 million for this misleading conduct.
So the lesson here is secret investment strategies, that promotion rather than just promoting actual properties, it's likely to be a scam. Okay, the next one, Ben, was this particular company had a very high profile. Nearly 1,000 people were encouraged to invest in property through self-managed super fund, and they didn't have the necessary financial license. So, surprise, surprise, they pushed off the planned stock, recommended developer stock, and didn't talk to them at all about alternatives like established property. So, they were told to act fast through creating that sense of false urgency, and they made promises that we are hoping to clear up in this podcast, that no investment is risk-free. So saying self-managed super fund is a risk-free way to build wealth still relies on the last mile. I love that what you said before, Ben. It's the last mile, because quite often a lot of these people get everything right until the last mile, Ben. Anything that's marketed as risk-free. But how did that one fall over?
Yeah, so ASIC eventually sued this company for unlicensed financial advice, and the Supreme Court of New South Wales ruled against them in operating outside these financial laws. On my travels as the chair of PIPA, at the time I heard some unbelievable stories about the call centre and the way in which their sales managers would operate their outbound sales teams, in terms of certain quotes that are just incredible, sort of messages out to the floor along the lines of, if you've got a conscience, you're not in the right building, or you can't sell, all of these sorts of crazy little things. Exactly. Wolf of Wall Street stuff. So definitely an aggressive business as part of that particular story.
So the lesson, folks, only licensed professionals, financial professionals, can give you advice on SMSF. So beware. Hopefully we've rounded that point. Now, the next one, Ben, is actually recent. It's as recent as last year. And this particular individual was a younger fella, and he was actually very prolific when it comes to advertising through social media. So very social media savvy in the age group. But this particular gentleman and his group of companies, they were also acting as unlicensed financial advisors. So they weren't operating with an Australian financial services license, whilst providing investment advice and managing funds. So the public record talks about over 10 unregistered managed investment schemes, raising over $30 million from a couple of hundred of investors. And here's the challenge. They were promised very high returns, 25 to 50% within 12 to 26 months, creating unrealistic expectations. And here we go, folks. They were encouraged to set up a self-managed super fund to participate, and then often weren't explained, fully explained the risks of doing so. So there's some common themes here, Ben.
This one's almost like a Ponzi type scheme where the new money that is sort of coming in is paying out the old money, which is the classic Ponzi model. I'm not assuming or alleging that this particular company is, if you work out who they are. I'm just letting people know that this is the sort of classic example of those investments. Well, one, it was obviously, there's meant to be, statements of advice and product disclosure statements as part of all of that stuff was not necessarily the way in which they were operating potentially. So from that point of view, it's definitely a clear indication of not working necessarily in the investor's best interests.
Now, this last one, Ben, is takes a very special human to be able to be the promoter of this scheme. But this particular individual targets grieving homeowners, right? So it falls into the predatory property advice category. And they taught investors how to target grieving families, exploiting their vulnerability so that they could buy properties below market value. So what does that mean? They accessed databases that saw people who were falling behind or who had life events that meant that they were vulnerable, and they were taught how to make approaches to them so that they could buy their properties. And I'm not sure it gets any lower than this, Ben, but
no, I think it's pretty ordinary.
High-priced courses again, which teach you how to do this. Now, this is probably a bunch of secrets that should stay secrets. Let's be honest. Reaching the most vulnerable people at a time when they are at their most vulnerable can't be any lower. So there was no regard for ethics. It was positioned as a savvy investment move rather than a morally questionable practice. This particular individual is still subject to ongoing investigation, Ben, but how did it collapse?
Well, effectively, there was an investigation that was led through media, which was great. So someone obviously started to expose what was happening there. And then you saw a special investigation on a current affair uncover a report about this public outrage. And then obviously some of the companies shut down and rebranded due to the backlash. So there's that, that evolution and then basically collapse on itself. That's what these particular operators do.
So if this one's important, if a property strategy involves exploiting people in distress, folks, that's not investing. That's being a predator. That is being a predator. And if you make money by being a predator, I hope the karma.
It's the worst form of opportunism. Oh. It's the worst form of opportunism.
Yeah. Let's hope that. So, folks. So there's 5 examples. I promise you we could have done more. I promise you in 10 years' time, that list will be different, but the same. Mm-hmm. The names will be different, but the tactics will be the same in 10 years' time. So have we done our job here today? Hopefully, we have given you some background that spruikers always evolve their tactics. But the core deception remains the same. There is a conflict of interest. They offer unrealistic promises, and they often mislead in their marketing as a hook to try and get you to listen to what they have to say. So this one's been around for a while, Ben, but we probably should all remember it, that if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.